Hi, thank you for coming back. Welcome to A Stitch in Crime with Erica. If you're new here, this is how we do things around here. We knit and crochet stuff, and we talk about crime. And I'm so thankful that you've come to join me today. I've had just a ridiculous week. I got 2 jobs, and at one of my jobs, we're just starting a brand new project. And then at my other job, we've got basically like deadlines that we've all had to hit. I am stressed out, y'all. It's fucking ridiculous. Like, I mean, it's like my stepdad would say, these are first world problems. These are good problems to have. I mean, I guess I should be grateful because honestly, I didn't think I'd be 30. I thought I'd be dead by now. I am still stressed. I guess I'm blessed to be stressed. Anyway, I need some stress relief after this week. If you do, park it in, come join me. We've got a great episode for you today because we're going to be working on my personal favorite pattern. We're going to get into knitting and we are going to make the My Little Secret crop top by Jessie Maed Designs. I am so happy to share this with you guys. I am not even joking. No bullshit. This is my favorite pattern. I have made like a dozen of these tops over the past year and a half since I learned how to make it. And I am not bullshitting you when I say this is just the perfect pattern. It's universal. I think it's flattering on everybody. Jessie has really gone out of her way to make it like an inclusive size, inclusive design. It's just great. You're gonna love it. Today we're gonna be using Creme Cotton yarn. I don't know who it's by, but you can only buy it at Michael's. It's like $9 a skein and you get 300 some odd yards in it, so it's a little bit pricey. I personally love it. I think it's great. Actually, I already have a My Little Secret crop that's in this color, but the difference is that this is cotton and the one that I have is an acrylic, and I really want a cotton one because it's summertime. Yeah, I know I'm being fussy, but put up with me. What I've done is I've already started to do the 1x1 ribbing on the bottom, and if you're a more experienced knitter, you might be looking at this and being like, Erica, you're supposed to knit it in the round. What are you doing with straight needles? Here's the thing, I'm really like dysfunctional when it comes to directional stuff, and I have a really bad habit of twisting my stitches. So whenever I start a pattern that's supposed to go in the round, I start them off on straight needles so that I get like an inch or 2 of just the bottom of it so that I can weave it together and make sure, okay, I'm not gonna twist my stitches, I'm not gonna fuck this up. So if you twist your stitches too, that's what I would recommend. And if you're new to knitting, you might have the background for this pattern. You're gonna need to know how to knit, purl, knit 2 together, slip, knit, bind off, and yarn over. So there's a few different things that you need to know how to do. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a beginner's pattern, but it's a good pattern to get started on more like next level projects. Like if you've got your knits and purls down, pick up your needles and let's go with this. So today we're going to be talking about the case of the Pladl family annihilation. And this case is actually really near to my heart just because it's about a lot of things. Let me tell you that first off. If you have any triggers associated whatsoever with any type of family trauma or drama, such as adoption, incest, any type of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, child abuse, abuse of adults, you name it, it's in this case. I am going to give you just the biggest trigger warning that I can think of. If you have any triggers or traumas associated with any of that stuff, please go take care of yourself. Do what you need to do because this one's a big one. I'm just gonna say that right off the jump. And one of the topics that it's about is adoption, and I'm not gonna get too into it, but adoption is a part of my family as well. So there's a lot about this case that resonated in my heart, and it's going to be tough to get through, but I think it touches on a lot of really important topics that are considered extremely taboo by society. Let's get going. So I'm going to start this story from the end, actually. I'm going to start it from the very end of the story. Ah, fuck. My bad, I dropped my yarn, y'all. I'm gonna start it from the end of the story, which is that a father of a newborn has gone and, at his home in North Carolina, smothered his newborn to death. He has then gone and drove up to New York to visit his estranged wife and her parents, finds his estranged wife and her father shoots them both before eventually taking his own life with his firearm. So how did we get here? Well, that ending was the tragic conclusion of a decades-long family story that spans several states across the East Coast, involving, like I said earlier, adoption, incest, abuse, you name it, this family has gone through it. So where do we start? Let's start with Stephen Pladl. Stephen Pladl was born on April 6th, 1975 in Levittown, New York, and Levittown is a community that's on Long Island. Stephen has always been just kind of an odd duck. There is something that is different about Stephen. So for example, whenever he was in high school, he was getting picked on because he went through this phase where he wore the same hockey jersey just the whole time. Like, he just never took that shit off. He has it in his school picture, and he was really a loner. He kept to himself. He would just stay by himself, muttering to himself. Just, we all know someone who's like that. Just someone who is very, not just different or eccentric. I mean, you're watching this, you're probably eccentric. But someone who's just off. So then, when Stephen's 20, he goes online and he meets a young woman named Alyssa Garcia. Alyssa was born in 1980, so she's 5 years younger than Stephen. Yeah, she's 15 and he's 20. When they start communicating online, and he's basically grooming her. And I know that some people are gonna debate with me about this because, oh, 15, 20, that's 5 years, that's not a big age difference or whatever. The way that I see it, if you're 20 and you're fucking around with a 15-year-old, one of two things is happening. Number one, you're kind of a fucking loser because how are you 20 and still relating to a 15-year-old? Like, what do you have going on with your life that you can relate to someone who is a sophomore in high school? Or, number two, you're a predator because you do have shit going on with your life and you're still messing around with people that don't because they are children. Sorry. Stephen fit into both of these categories. So Stephen's, communicating with Alyssa, he's grooming her online, and he eventually convinces her to dip out from her home in Texas and move up to New York and be with him, which she does. One thing leads to another. Now Alyssa's pregnant. So on January 29th, 1998, Alyssa delivered her and Stephen's baby, and they named her Denise Pladl. Now Denise was actually born in Texas, according to records, but they do go back up to New York. I really don't understand the timeline here. The point is that she's away from her family, she is away from her home, she is just up there with Stephen and this baby being a teenage mom. And Stephen starts getting really abusive to baby Denise. He is pinching her when she's crying so hard that it's leaving welts, like bruises on her body. When she's crying, he would lock her in a cooler, and Alyssa would go to try to get her out of the cooler, and Stephen would physically prevent Alyssa from rescuing her infant from the cooler that he's trapped her in. Who the fuck abuses an infant? I'm not saying that any abuse is good. Obviously all abuse is bad, but I just don't know what a person has going on with themselves that they could look at an infant, like literally a newborn baby, and think, I gotta beat that person up. Who the fuck are you? Anyway, so this is obviously a really bad scene, and Alyssa was too afraid to tell anybody what's going on. She's a teenager, she's scared, she doesn't have her family there, and at night, Alyssa would hold baby Denise, just rocking her over and over, going, I'm sorry that your life is like this, I'm so sorry that I brought you here, because this is so bad. So Alyssa makes the hardest decision she's ever had to make in her life, and she chooses to put baby Denise up for adoption. Denise is at the age of 8 months, quickly adopted by a couple called the Fuscos, who are Tony and Kelly. Tony and Kelly live in a community called Wingdale, New York, which is, I believe, either in Dover or like part of Dover, and Dover itself is a working class town that is 2 hours outside of New York City. Tony and Kelly adopt Denise when she's 8 months old, and they rename her Katie Rose Fusco. And after that, Katie has a pretty good life. They have one more daughter, so Katie has a sister, and they stayed at a trailer park in Dover where Katie just blossomed. She ended up being a really cool girl. She was really into animals, and she would go around rescuing stray cats. She became a vegetarian really quickly because she was just so into animals. She loved animals. She took up cheerleading. She also took up drumming, which is awesome. She had all of these different interests going on, and she was a warm, bubbly, bright girl with a seemingly brilliant future. See, Katie was a really gifted artist. She was constantly drawing. She was one of those kids, you know, when you were growing up that you had that kid in your class that they could just draw anything and you were really impressed by them because you couldn't do shit? Yeah. That was Katie. And she was drawing cartoons, she was drawing comic strips, and then as she got older, her artistic tastes began to mature a little bit. For her senior art project, she created a portfolio of art that depicted the historical struggles of women in misogyny. So she was really talented and also very socially conscious as well. And I gotta read y'all this quote, because she was a bright girl. "A pen and something to draw on became a safe place for me. Ink became my weapon against rules and regulations. There wouldn't be a corner in a classroom or park that didn't have a secret little character living on it. Ask an artist why creating is important to them, and they won't ever stop giving out reasons. To be short, for me, a life without art is no life at all." Like, fuck yeah, Katie, you're so cool, dude. And by this point, she's already thinking what she wants to do for a living. She has this shit planned out. She wanted to go to community college, get a 2-year transfer degree, transfer to SUNY University, get a degree in art, and then go into a career in digital advertising. All of those decisions are so smart. And she's like 17 making these choices. Like, go Katie. Hell yeah. But Katie had always known from her parents that she was adopted. They didn't try to pass it off, which, if you do that, it's none of my business, but so they always were straight up like, yeah, dude, you're adopted. And when you are adopted or you have an adoption situation in your immediate family, you have often that desire to reconnect with people that are your kin biologically. And Katie had that. So by this point, it's the mid-2010s, we have the internet, and Katie is able to contact Alyssa on Facebook in August of 2015. And this is just amazing news for Alyssa. Let's kick it back over to the Pladls. What are they up to? After putting Denise, who is now Katie, up for adoption, Alyssa always had feelings of loss and regret. It was always a really tough call for her to do what she did. She knew that that's what she needed to do in order for her baby to survive and thrive, which she did. But as a mother, she was traumatized and wounded by it. So after the adoption, Alyssa was carrying around a picture of her baby with her, just taking that through life. She had always been thinking about that baby. Later on, Steven and Alyssa, they do stay together, and they do get married. Less surprisingly, Steven stays being a piece of shit. Back to Steven, this dude starts off sucking and then gets worse. Alyssa becomes the main breadwinner in the family. By the time that Katie had contacted her, she was managing a T-Mobile store. Alyssa was always the one bringing home the money. Steven was a skilled carpenter, like he had skills, he just didn't do anything with them. He just stayed unemployed. They do have 2 more children together. They have 2 daughters. Their second daughter together is born in 2006, and their third daughter is born in 2010. Steven wasn't battering and smothering the children as infants like he did with Katie, but he's not that much better of a father. He stays being abusive as a father. Their second daughter is actually autistic, and Steven would just talk terrible things to her and be calling her like the R word and stuff, which I'm just gonna segue. As an autistic person, that shit's genetic. If your kid's autistic, it's somewhere in your family. And I'm just gonna say it, he wore the same shirt every day at school for years. Guess where the fuck she probably got it from? And he's calling her the R word. What a piece of shit. I try to stay neutral doing these, but I can't with this man. He's abusing his children. It's hard to stay neutral about child abuse. I'm sorry. So he's really emotionally abusive to them. I guess at one point, one of the children, when she was 3 years old, had an accident on herself, and Steven just took her, put her in the bath, and stuck her up in that bath for hours. So that when Alyssa got home from work, she's crying, her daughter is crying and saying, "Can I get out of the bath now?" And Alyssa's like... So that's the house that these 3 women were living under with this man. He's very violent. He's extremely temperamental. He's punching things. He's throwing furniture. At one point, a stray cat had snuck into their home, and he just fucking killed it with his bare hands and said, "I don't like cats," and just killed it and threw it away. You're probably wondering, okay, why did Alyssa stay? Which is such a loaded and complicated question when it comes to abuse. I think that the first question should always be, why is this person behaving like this? But the question so often is, why are people staying with them? Well, we actually have a reason. Alyssa said that when she threatened to leave Steven, he responded by saying, "Okay, well then I'm gonna go get a video camera, I'm gonna get a gun, I'm gonna blow my brains out, and I'm gonna tape it and make sure that you watch." So what are you supposed to do with that? Also, let's keep in mind that, yeah, she's an adult now, but she's been being groomed by this fucking guy ever since she was a teenager. You don't just drop that. So for me, the question isn't, oh, why did she stay? For me, the question was, how was he allowed to persist with this shit, horrible behavior for as long as he was? But by August 2015, when Katie is hitting up Alyssa on Facebook, their marriage between Alyssa and Steven actually is on the verge of just totally breaking down. Alyssa was planning to leave him at this point. It just hadn't happened yet. They were not sleeping up in the same bed. They were just staying up in the same house. It was like that. But then Katie comes in. Katie starts corresponding with all of them on Facebook. She's really excited to get to know her birth family, and Steven and Alyssa are both really excited to have her. Oh, I forgot to mention at some point, the Pladls moved from New York to Henrico County, Virginia, which is in the Richmond area. My bad, forgot to mention that detail. Anyway, so after about a year of correspondence, in the summer of 2016, Katie went down to Virginia from New York to meet her biological parents, Alyssa and Steven. And at first, it is idyllic. She's getting to know the people who made her. That's so big in adoption. She's finally meeting people that she feels like she's from. Like, when I interact with new people from the side of my family where there was adoption happening, I feel the same way. I'm just like, wow, we are cut from the same cloth. How did we all become programmers? We are cut from the same cloth, aren't we? And that's what Katie must have been feeling. She's feeling so connected with her parents and her 2 younger sisters. So much so that she shocks everyone and decides, actually, I'm not gonna do the college thing. I'm moving down to Virginia to be with the Pladls. This was a big shocker, but Steven and Alyssa are not gonna say no. It's wonderful. They have their daughter back. So that summer, she moves down to be with her parents, biological parents, Steven and Alyssa Pladl. Now, like I said, Steven doesn't have a job. He's just staying at home doing, I don't fucking know, nothing. The 2 girls are in school, and Alyssa is working full-time to support everybody. So Katie and Steven are spending a lot of time together, and they become very close to one another. So much so that Steven starts changing some things up about himself. All of a sudden, he's growing his hair from short to long, he's shaving off his beard, he's dressing a little bit better, he's putting on some more form-fitting clothes. He wants to make himself look younger and maybe a little more like his new daughter. And the 2 of them are getting really close. Like, Steven starts sleeping on the floor of Katie's room close, which is extremely disturbing to Alyssa, but she's just kind of like, you know what? This is fucking weird, and I don't want to be a part of this or you anymore. I'm just gonna dip. She takes their 2 daughters, and March 2017, Alyssa is gone. She gets her own place, and she starts divorce proceedings from Steven. She's like, fuck this shit, I'm done. So Katie and Steven now are living together, and They get shared custody, like they get some visitation with the other two girls. Most of the time they're staying with Alyssa. The girls actually admit that they prefer it this way. They don't really miss being with their dad, but they still go and spend some time over there. So after one such parenting time visit with Steven and Katie, Steven brings their daughters back to Alyssa and says, hey, our 12-year-old is acting like shit. I don't know what's going on with her. Why don't you try reading her diary and figuring out what the fuck is going on with her? Alyssa's like, okay, that's weird, but whatever, I'll do it. Which, probably don't do that, but I can understand why. Steven's got a history. Alyssa probably feels like she has to bring the other two to him, but she, I assume, doesn't want to. The girls don't want to be there. Alyssa's probably just trying to make sure that he's not doing anything really horrible to them. Alyssa finds out that actually Steven isn't doing anything fucked up to them directly. Here's what Alyssa finds when she reads their 12-year-old's diary. She finds an entry and it goes like this. So now she is pregnant and gained weight, and my dad calls her baby also his baby. Did he make her pregnant? My dad even says she's my stepmom. WTF, he doesn't even want me to say or call her sister anymore. Katie is my sister. She's probably his wife now, but in nature, she's my sister. What the fuck does that mean? So Alyssa is completely shook. She is like, oh my fucking god, is this a thing that's happening? Like, literally, this is what's happening? Steven and Katie are fucking, and Katie's pregnant? Oh, what? So she's totally discombobulated. Wouldn't you be? Oh my god. That's shocking. That's very shocking news, and Alyssa is completely blindsided by this. I believe that she was blindsided. She goes to confront Steven, and all Steven says is, I thought you knew. We are in love. And Alyssa promptly calls the police to report them for incest. Now, I want to take a pause here for a second, and let's unpack how we got here. How did we get to a place where Steven and Katie, who are biologically father and daughter, are now in a sexual and romantic relationship with each other? What's going on here? Is this abuse? Personally, I think that any type of relationship that Steven Pladl tries to have with any woman, regardless of his biological relation to them, is probably going to be abusive because that's who he is. I don't think that he's capable of conducting a non-abusive relationship with a significant other by this point. He has not demonstrated that he is. However, we need to address the fact that they were biologically father and daughter. And I have read a lot about this case. I have devoured as much news as I could find. I have listened to as many podcasts and watched as many other videos as I could. When I first came across this case a few years ago, I needed to understand what was going on. Just because there has been adoption in my life and so much of this that I personally find relatable, I needed to understand what happened here. What this was a case of is a concept known as genetic sexual attraction. Genetic sexual attraction is a phenomenon that occurs between members of the same biological family who are taken away from each other when one or both of them is very young and they reunite at a later date. It's estimated that up to 50% of reunification cases do involve genetic sexual attraction, at least from one person. There is not much that is understood or well known about genetic sexual attraction. We don't completely know why it occurs. It's not well studied. Research for this phenomenon is not well funded. It directly relates to one of the last remaining and greatest taboos when it comes to sex: incest. And the problem that I had with most of the materials that I could find that related to the Pladl case was that they were really hooked in on the fact that Katie and Steven were biologically father and daughter, and the incest taboo was very strong for them. It was, oh my god, gross, that's her dad, and she's his daughter, and isn't that disgusting, and who could these people even be? I'm gonna stop you right there. Yeah, it's incredibly disgusting to think about, but it's not helpful to stigmatize, and most of the podcasts and videos that I've found that talk about the Pladl case spend a relentless amount of time just stigmatizing Katie and Steven for the relationship that they're having. That's completely unhelpful. Consider if you are in Steven or Katie, especially Katie's position, how are you going to seek help? How are you going to go out and tell somebody, I'm in a relationship with my biological father, I need help for this, especially when he is abusing you, which undoubtedly Steven is, because, and I don't mean because Steven is Katie's father, and how could he not be abusing her? She wouldn't want this unless she was being abused, and she's being brainwashed, blah, blah, blah. No, I think that Steven is abusing Katie because I have yet to see any evidence that Steven can have a relationship with a woman and not abuse her. I have yet to see that Steven can have a relationship with children and not abuse them. Steven was an extremely abusive and toxic human being. The fact that Katie was his daughter, maybe this sounds bad, but it's a lot less relevant to me than the fact that Katie was his victim. I think that stigmatizing when GSA occurs does a great disservice to people who are in these situations. How are you going to reach out for help if the person that you're with starts abusing you, if the person that you're with happens to be your sibling or your parent? Like, it's just not helpful. That's all I have to say about it. Back to Alyssa. So she calls the police to report what she's found in her daughter's diary, and the fact that Steven has just admitted that he's in a relationship with Katie. About a week later, on May 31st, the police interview the younger Pladl daughters about what's been going on between Steven and Katie at Dad's house. So shit's starting to get pretty hot for Steven and Katie, and in June 2017, they moved to Knightsdale, North Carolina, which is where Steven's mom lives, and they get out of Virginia. There is an investigation on them. They've since been interviewed by the police but not been arrested. They're just gonna dip the fuck out. A month later, in July of 2017, Steven and Katie actually get married. They get married in Maryland. And yes, they do lie on the part of the application that asks if you're biologically related. They said that they weren't. And at this point, how are they going to prove that? Katie's birth certificate says that her parents are Tony and Kelly. Speaking of Tony and Kelly, guess who show up for the wedding? Yes, Tony and Kelly Fusco, and Steven's mom, Grace. And they look preposterously uncomfortable in this picture. If you ask me, maybe I'm not reading the vibe right, but they look uncomfortable to me. The perspective that they had with, well, do we support Katie marrying her biological father, Steven? Tony and Kelly were really just like, we're gonna support her because we want her to know that we love her unconditionally, and we have to do this if we want to maintain a relationship with her. Which, that's gotta be so fucking difficult. I can't imagine what any member of this family is going through by this point. All of it is just so, like, whoa, holy shit, this is a thing that's happening. And everyone is just doing the best that they can, mostly because they love Katie. So down there in Knightsdale, on September 1st, 2017, Katie and Steven's son, Bennett Kieran Pladl, is born. And for the first few months of Bennett's life, they have a really idyllic domestic bliss life together. Katie dresses up Bennett for his first Halloween. Also, look at this shit! Look at how good an artist she is! Do you see this shit? I am shooketh. She is just so talented. Anyway, they have domestic bliss together. That is until January 27th, 2018, 2 days before Katie's 20th birthday. Steven and Katie were arrested in Knightsdale, North Carolina on charges of incest and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. I don't know where the delinquency of a minor charge came in. It could be from one of two things. I'm pretty sure it was because of what had happened back in Virginia with Steven and Alyssa's younger two daughters. They knew that their father, Steven, was in a relationship with their sister, Katie. They were very clear that they knew that. I think that's where the charge came from. I don't know if you can get charged with delinquency of a minor if it's because you and your partner were biologically related and the minor is the child you have together. Is that a thing? I don't know. And that's another thing that comes up a lot with these cases of incest, is that when two people who are closely related have children together, the chances of their progeny developing serious health complications from having genetically related parents is quite high. But I'm just speaking as somebody with a genetic illness myself. If somebody said, hey, you shouldn't have kids because your offspring are going to have this thing, we would consider that eugenics, and rightfully so. The state isn't here to regulate my decision to have children. I have regulated that decision for myself. But if the children go on to develop health complications because their parents are related, that's a whole thing. Anyway, Stephen and Katie are released on bail under two conditions. One, Stephen and Katie are not to have contact with each other, and two, Katie is ordered to go back to Dover and be with her parents, Tony and Kelly Fusco. Grace Pladl, Stephen's mom, receives custody of Bennett. Stephen and Katie are not forbidden to see Bennett, but Grace has custody and legal keep of him. So, April 11th and 12th, 2018, as they're awaiting trial, Katie from Dover contacts Stephen. She breaks the no contact order, and she calls Stephen to let him know, hey, I'm done. Actually, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. We're breaking up. I'm not doing this shit anymore. I don't know why Katie came to that decision. Knowing everything that we do about Katie and how independent and strong-minded she was, I would assume that it was of her own accord. I would assume that she came to that choice herself. Stephen absolutely fucking loses it. Stephen goes to Grace's house and asks for baby Bennett and to transport him out of state. Stephen says, I'm gonna take Bennett and I'm gonna take him to see his mom. We're gonna go to New York together. And Grace complies. Stephen takes Bennett back to his own home and he smothers Bennett, leaving his body in the closet. Then he gets in his van. He drives up from Nightsdale, several hours away, to Dover, New York. He's driving the whole night in his van, while his infant son's lifeless body is still up in his closet at his home in North Carolina. Once he gets to Dover, he stakes out the Fusco family home, waiting for the two of them to come out. Now it's April the 12th, which is a Thursday. And by this point, Katie had gotten into the routine of going and visiting her grandmother in Connecticut on Thursdays, so her grandma stays in New Milford. So Katie and her father Tony are going to New Milford, Connecticut to visit her grandmother. Stephen, having just been staking them out in the wee hours of the morning, follows Tony and Katie to New Milford. When Tony and Katie are stopped at an intersection, Stephen comes up on them and shoots them both to death, execution style, like firing squad style. That's at 8:40 a.m. And there are witnesses to this. People are calling the police. It's a horrible, disgusting scene. Two people have just been brutally shot to death. The police are on their way. But by 8:45, it is too late to apprehend him. Stephen Pladl kills himself in his car with his own gun. And sometime around this time in Nightsdale, North Carolina, Stephen's mom, Grace, also contacts the police, and she makes this horrible 911 call.
911, address of the emergency.
Yes. My son just called me, and he told me oh my God, he killed his baby, and he's in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby?
So this indicates that at some point, Stephen did let his mom know, hey, I just killed my fucking child, and I'm gonna go up to Connecticut. I can't imagine what is going through her head. That's the most terrifying thing to have to deal with in your life. Literally so many terrifying things to have to deal with have just happened to her. So by 9:15 a.m. in New Milford, Connecticut, the authorities found Stephen deceased in his car, having died by suicide, thus bringing an end to 20 years of terror that he inflicted upon so many people. The aftermath of this is that Tony, Katie, and Bennett were all laid to rest up in Dover, where Katie grew up. I don't know where Stephen was laid to rest. I don't fucking care. And Alyssa has just experienced the worst and most traumatic thing that you can go through as a mother. She told news outlets that because Stephen had been so abusive to Katie back in the day when she was still baby Denise, she believes that Stephen was just finishing what he had started 20 years ago. And actually, whenever Katie and Stephen started getting close, before Alyssa knew anything that was going on, she warned Katie, this is why I gave you up. Stephen was abusing you as an infant, and Katie didn't really think much of it. So Alyssa is completely devastated. My hope for her and Grace Pladl and the two girls between Alyssa and Steven is that they have found some semblance of peace and solace in the aftermath of all of this. I think of how many people's lives that Steven Pladl ruined single-handedly. He managed to commit every single terrible crime that you can in a family. He has systematically tortured and abused so many members of his own family. To me, the incest thing, the GSA aspect of it, like I said, that's another conversation. Because when you get down to it, the pressing thing in the Pladl case is the fact that this is a man with serious mental illness, a hateful, horrible human being who was just allowed to proliferate abuse upon everybody unchecked for over 40 fucking years. It concerns me gravely that we don't have better resources to prevent situations like this from happening. And the incest thing, that's why I get so hung up on the stigma aspect of it. What if Katie, before the arrest, had tried to leave with her son? What if she had gone to a counselor or a social worker and said, I have been in a consensual sexual and romantic relationship with my biological father, we have a son together, and he is abusing me. Alright, well, you don't have a son anymore and you're going to jail. That's ultimately what happened. I genuinely, this is one of those cases that I think about and I get so fucking heartbroken. I'm not trying to sound cold, but I don't get affected by a lot of cases as much as I do about this one. So yeah, that's the story of the Pladl family murders. Again, a lot of the people involved in the story are still living. Please respect their privacy. I sincerely hope that they have found peace. My heart goes out to them so tremendously and deeply. And thank you for joining me through this, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.